something I should have done myself. We'll now go to questions. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I thank you for that statement at the outset? My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. 4 years ago, Mr Morrison brought a lump of coal into the federal parliament, and in 2019 he claimed emissions reduction targets would wreck the economy. When did he change his mind?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Wong for the question, albeit I don't accept the premise of all aspects of that question, Mr President. Indeed, the government went to the last election, as we have to previous elections, with commitments to emissions reductions targets. They weren't the same commitments as those opposite, that's true, just as we didn't have the same policies as those opposite. But we certainly went to the election with emissions reduction targets, and indeed, despite the fact that those opposite and others have always claimed that when we've outlined coalition policies to achieve those targets, they've always said it will fail, the targets won't be met, the government's policies won't achieve it. And guess what's happened on every single occasion? Of course, we've actually exceeded the targets. The policies have worked. The policies have delivered the emissions reductions targets. And that is what we continue to do, Mr President. It's what we continue to do in terms of delivering and achieving the 2030 emissions reductions targets, which we took to the last election, Mr President. Contrary to what Senator Wong said, the debate at the last election was about whether or not the Labor Party, with an increased target, had a plan, had a policy, had it costed, had any idea of how they were going to achieve it. The coalition had outlined how we were going to achieve our targets, and I'm very pleased to say we're on track to meet those targets. We're on track to exceed those targets. And in doing so, it helps to ensure that on a per-person basis, Australia's reduction of emissions is indeed amongst some of the biggest in the world. On a per-person basis, we're achieving close to a 50% reduction in emissions. But even on an absolute basis in terms of the rate of emissions reductions, we are achieving faster rates of emissions reductions than Canada or Japan or New Zealand or the United States. I don't say that to criticise those nations, it's just a statement of what is occurring and a demonstration that despite the fact those opposite like to try to talk Australia down, like to try to be negative in some ways in relation to our achievements, our emissions are trending down and we continue to deliver policies to achieve that.
Has expired. Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr Morrison has said electric vehicles would end the weekend and suggested that batteries to store renewable energy were as useful as a big banana. When did he decide he was wrong?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, once again we get the selective quoting, the misrepresentation from those opposite. Mr Morrison talking about Labor policies to mandate, Labor policies. Senator Wong wants to go and ask questions that are about comments made by the Prime Minister in relation to Labor policies, obviously opens up scrutiny of Labor policies. Now, the Labor policies taken to the last election were about trying to mandate outcomes and to mandate outcomes that would have different impacts. Now, of course, technology moves on, time moves on, and as technology and time move on, we want to make sure that Australia is able to embrace the opportunities of the future, able to lead where we can in terms of the opportunities of the future. We're doing that through our investment in technology, not the type of taxes the Labor Party had proposed previously. Our investment is in making sure Australia can embrace the technologies that suit our nation, give our regions the advantages to secure jobs and opportunities in the future while lowering emissions.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Wong, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr Morrison and Mr Joyce have railed against climate action for over a decade. The Nationals are holding Mr Morrison to ransom, and Mr Morrison is refusing to take net zero by 2050 to the coalition party room. How can Australians possibly believe Mr Morrison's last-minute scramble to land a political deal on net zero by 2050, under 2 weeks out from Glasgow, is real?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, Australians should absolutely have confidence that our government will deliver the policies we implement and that those policies will work for the future on meeting the commitments Australia makes, because that's what we've done. That's what we've done time and time again. That's what we've done time and time again, Mr President. That when we said we would achieve Australia's emission reductions targets, and here were the policy profiles that we would do so, whilst abolishing Labor's carbon tax, we got on, we implemented those policies, and we've achieved those targets. and we've exceeded those targets. And that's what we're going to continue to do. That's why Australians should have faith. They can look at our track record. In fact, they should have the faith that our side of politics will achieve that without the types of policies those opposite have been known to embrace, that drive up costs of electricity, that drive up costs for Australian businesses, that hurt Australian families, that risk Australian jobs. That's what Australians should fear in terms of the policies of those opposite, because they've shown a track record with those sorts of policies. We've shown a track record of being able to lower emissions, lower power prices, but increase the strength of the Australian economy.
Expired. Senator order on my left. Senator Chandler, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck. Can the Minister provide an update on how Australia's vaccination rollout is progressing, particularly in our home state of Tasmania, and how the national plan is working to secure our COVID recovery so we can safely reopen and live with the virus?
Minister representing the Minister for Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Chandler, for your question. Mr President, yes, our home state certainly has something to celebrate by passing the first national plan milestone of 70% double-dosed in the last day. It's an important milestone, Mr President, and of course the nation has also passed 70%, Mr President, of vaccination post-16. Mr President, our nation continues to surge ahead, rolling up our sleeves with a total of 33,489,485 doses administered nationally as of last night, Mr President. 14.6 million Australians are now fully vaccinated, Mr President. That's 70.8% of those over 16, 81.6% of those over 50 and 86.6%, Mr President, of those over 70. We know that the people over 70 are the most vulnerable cohort when it comes to COVID-19, Mr President, and we now have over 95% of that population who have had at least one dose. Mr President, can I congratulate and commend those who have been instrumental in us achieving those targets so far. Our healthcare workers, our doctors, our pharmacists, our nurses, those in the state clinics who have all worked so hard, Mr President, in over 9,200 vaccine outlets around the country. Thank you for your work. We obviously need you to do more, Mr President. Our national plan, agreed by National Cabinet, is progressing just as we said it would, and yesterday we reached the commencement of Phase B, where we can start looking at lower restrictions and our country opening up once again.
Senator Chandler, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the Minister outline what happens now that we have reached Phase B of the rollout?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. I don't need to be a psychic, Senator Watt. We've actually reached Phase B of the rollout. Mr President, we will see the country opening up, as we are in New South Wales and Victoria and here in the ACT, Mr President. As the Prime Minister said in an opinion piece that ran in Tasmania today, each and every vaccination, Mr President, brings us closer to bringing our country back together again, and I join with Senator Smith in his urging of Western Australians to roll their sleeves up and get the vaccine, Mr President, so we can join Western Australians in having a free country. Families and friends can get together, Mr President. Businesses can get going again, Mr President. Importantly, our small businesses can get back to work, firing up jobs. There can be a safe easing of border restrictions as the vaccination rates continue to surge across Australia, Mr President, and we can all start to take our lives back.
Senator Chandler, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank the Minister for his response. Can the Minister advise what preparations the government has made for the rollout of a booster program?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Mr President. A booster program will give us a boost in protection to those who are fully vaccinated with their second dose, Mr President. Of course, that's 70% of the Australian population. At the moment, the plan is being progressed through the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immigration, ATAGI, and we expect advice will be provided to the Health Minister in the
Senator
not
Keneally.
too distant future, Mr. President. The government has been preparing for boosters
Senator
and
Thorpe.
secured 151 million doses for 22 and 23 to ensure all Australians can access a booster if it is recommended by the medical experts. Maintaining high levels of vaccination in our community will ensure we are protecting everyone, particularly those who are most vulnerable to COVID-19, including those, of course, in our loved ones in aged care, Mr. President. We will be building on the strong foundation that we have already established through the vaccine rollout.
Minister. Thank you, Minister. Senator Sheldon.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the Nationals, Senator Mackenzie. I refer to the National Subcommittee consisting of Senator Mackenzie, Mr Littleproud, Mr Pitt and Mr Hogan, settling the Nationals' election wish list for Mr Morrison in return for support of net zero by 2050. How much taxpayer money have the Nationals demanded Mr Morrison spend to gain their support for net zero by 2050?
The Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Thank you, Senator Sheldon, for your question. Well, as we've been very, very clear as the second party of government, we are taking our time to carefully consider the proposition put forward by the Prime Minister that Australia will be committing to net zero by 2050
Order. Senator Watt.
in Glasgow. That is
Senator
actually
Gallagher.
what rural and regional Australians sent us here to do, and we don't apologise for that. Now, I know, as Doug Cameron and I was privileged to serve with Doug Cameron in this chamber for many years, made note of how your party processes operate, and that you'd all had lobotomies, and you basically just do what your leader says, and you're a bunch of zombies, as I recall, direct quote in Rabbit Ears. In our political party—
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Watt, on a point of order.
On relevance, in light of your ruling, this question was very straight about the amount of money that the Nationals have demanded. The minister is veering off into exactly the kind of political attack that you said was not permitted.
There were two parts of my presentation to the Senate, Senator Watt. I think you've selectively quoted one of them, but I will bring the minister back to the question. You have the call, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much. And so the process that our political party has determined to undertake is to consult our colleagues to understand and appreciate their needs and concerns for the next 30 years, not for the next 6 months towards the election, and to then put forward a document that is based on the principles that will underpin the negotiations between the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister. We've been very, very clear. This is not about 30 pieces of silver. This is not about some beads and some mirrors. This is actually about how do we secure and protect rural and regional Australians and our industries in a decarbonised future.
Senator Keneally.
That is about doing our job. And so I'm very proud to be part of a political party and part of a subcommittee that is actually focused on securing the regions in this proposed future that the Prime Minister and the government is seeking to deliver. Now, if that actually can't
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Sheldon, a supplementary question.
Have any Liberal members requested that the Nationals include particular items in their pre-election wish list to Mr Morrison?
Minister.
Well, I think we're always happy to talk to our Liberal colleagues about how the National Party can help them deliver on their needs and interests for their communities. I mean, at the end of the day, we've been sent here to do one thing, and that is to stand up for our communities, and that is exactly what we're doing. So, Senator Canavan, that interjection wasn't was relevant, and so I'll take it. The issue was that who I haven't received submissions from is the Labor Party members for rural and regional Australia,
please,
how we can actually assist them and assist their foresters.
Please resume your seat. Senator Watt, on a point of order.
Again on relevance, Mr President. A very straight question, no hyperbole. Have any Liberal members requested that the Nationals include particular items on the list they're providing to Mr Morrison? No hyperbole. It's a straight question.
Senator Watt, I've allowed you to restate the question. Minister, you have the call.
Thank you very much. You know, there are a lot of Liberal Party colleagues that have been concerned about what a move towards net zero by 2050 may mean for rural and regional communities.
Order.
Now, they've made those. You've quoted those back to me in the chamber this week. It should not be a surprise to you at all.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Sheldon, a second supplementary question.
Will the minister guarantee the full details of any Nationals agreement to support net zero by 2050 will be made public?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. What I will guarantee you, I won't be guaranteeing you, Senator Sheldon, to disclose what the National Party room discusses, but what I will be able to guarantee you is that our party will never resile from standing up for the people that sent us here. And it is very, very sad to watch the party that used to stand up for the working class in this country fall over in the face of the threat of the Greens in your inner-city urban seats, and member after member, and other than Senator Ciccone from Victoria, you are silent on water policy, you are silent on forestry and standing up for forestry workers, you are silent on food processors and food manufacturing. You know what? What a joke you've become to the people that actually— you were set up in Balcaldon, out in regional Queensland. And
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Rice.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services. Minister, this week is Anti-Poverty Week. Yesterday, former New South Wales Liberal Minister Prue Goward was condemned by anti-poverty organisations and advocates as being disturbing, abusive and inaccurate for saying out loud how Liberals like her view people trapped in poverty as huge cost centres, as an underclass of Australians who are neglectful parents and almost entirely lacking in discipline. Minister, as another Liberal minister, will you join me in condemning her appalling statements and abuse of some of the most vulnerable people in our community?
Just before I call the minister, interjections are always disorderly, but particularly during the asking of questions. If you want everyone in the chamber, particularly me, to hear the question, then I do need some silence. The Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Rice for her question. In the absence of actually having seen the comments to which Senator Rice refers, I won't make any specific comment about that, but what I will say is that I take my responsibility as a Minister for Families and Social Services extremely seriously, and the absolute total focus of the activities of my office and my department are making sure that we support the most vulnerable people in Australia. Unquestionably, that is our single purpose and role. Now, whether that be through providing them with payments, whether supporting them in working age payments, or whether that be through some of their pension.
Oh, sorry, Senator Rice.
Relevance, even if the minister hasn't seen the questions, I said what they were, and I just asking her and condemning them. Of the people trapped in poverty are huge cost centres, as an underclass of Australians who are neglectful parents and almost entirely lacking in discipline.
I've given you the chance to repeat part of the question. I cannot direct the minister how to answer the question. Minister, you have the call for 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I reiterate my initial comments. But I am not going to make a comment about something that you're saying, but I will absolutely guarantee to this chamber unequivocally that my absolute focus is making sure that the resources of my department and the resources that are provided by the taxpayers of Australia to support vulnerable Australians, to make sure that we support them when they find themselves in situations, whether it be unemployed, whether it be when they're victims of domestic violence, whether it be supporting the states and territories in their frontline service provision, in the case of child protection and the like. I mean, absolute focus of my department is always to support the most vulnerable people in our community. And that is why we have always been so tremendously focused not only on creating jobs but actually working with Australians to get them out of unemployment. Because you refer to Poverty Week, Senator Rice, and one of the key things that has come out of many of the reports, some this week
Senator
and
Thorpe.
others that have been released around this particular issue, is that we know that people who are on unemployment benefits do it way tougher than those people who've got a job, and that's why we're focused on getting them into work.
Please resume your seat. Senator Rice, order. Senator Rice, please resume your seat. I just asked for order in the chamber while questions were being asked. Senator Rice.
Thanks, President. Minister, poverty is a political choice. Last year, your government increased income support during the lockdowns, but this year hundreds of thousands of people have lived through lockdowns on payments below the poverty line, going without food, without medicines and at risk of homelessness. And the removal of COVID disaster payments means thousands more people are now joining them. Minister, do you agree that the job seeker rate of $44 a day is not enough to live on?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well,
Senator Thorpe.
No government has done more to walk side by side to support Australians through this COVID pandemic. We have supported Australians, whether it be through increases in the job seeker payment last year, whether it be through the COVID disaster payment that was administered through Senator Mackenzie's department to support those people in Australia who found themselves in lockdowns of recent times, whether it be the business supports that have been put in place. But we also understand that as a government we have a responsibility to maintain the sustainability of payments that are made. We have to make sure that we support people in a safety net.
Apologies, Senator Rice.
Mr President, point of order. The question was whether the minister agreed that the job seeker rate of $44 a day is not enough to live on. Relevance. Relevance. She is not going to the relevance of the question. Is $44 a day enough to live on?
Senator Rice, you've had another opportunity to restate part of the question. It was a very broad question. The minister was being directly relevant. Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And as I was saying, the obligation of governments are to make sure that these sorts of payments are sustainable into the future. We have to balance supporting people when they find themselves out of work, but also making sure that the incentive is there for them to go to work. That's why we create jobs, and that's why we are the government.
Senator Rice, a second supplementary question.
Minister, I've heard from many constituents who inadvertently received both JobSeeker and JobKeeper, and they're now being pursued for those debts. Minister, why are you going after people on income support but not taking on the big corporations that profited with billions of dollars on JobKeeper?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, firstly, I would say that we need to be very clear around the fact that any fraudulent activity in relation to any payments that are received, no matter who they're received by, whether they be by businesses or individuals, are always pursued by government, because it is our obligation as the custodians of taxpayers' funds to make sure that people who have received something that they are not entitled, that we pursue that. I would also say that in making sure that when we put these things in place, we were very, very clear to make sure that people understood that if they were receiving JobKeeper, that they were required to declare it as income. If you go onto our website, that was very, very clear that was earnings, and you had to declare those earnings. But to your point, Senator Rice, we will pursue anybody who has received taxpayer funding when they have not been entitled
Minister,
to it.
time For the answer has expired. Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. The 2009 Defence White Paper foreshadowed increased tension in the region and announced the need to increase our submarine force from 6 to 12 submarines. The RAN was supposed to have 12 new submarines by 2039. Now that the smoke has dissipated, now that the mirrors have been removed, it is clear that under the new plan, in 2039, we will instead have only 5 ageing Collins-class submarines. In October last year, the then DFAT Secretary, Her Excellency Frances Addison, advised that the China-Taiwan situation concerned her more than any time in the last 3.5 decades of her career. Why has the government left us so vulnerable with so few submarines under these circumstances?
The Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Payne.
Thanks, Senator Patrick, for his question. And in acknowledging the number of points that the senator made, I would note firstly that the government has clearly stated the fact is that Australia's strategic environment has deteriorated in ways that weren't anticipated even 5 years ago. We know that the Indo-Pacific is now the global epicentre of strategic competition, and that's why the AUKUS agreement between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States is so important and so necessary. In terms of capability itself, we are delivering as a government on our commitment to deliver to our servicewomen and men the equipment they need to keep us safe. And I can confirm in that context that defence spending under this government will rise above 2% of GDP in the coming financial year. There are a number of additional capabilities in which we are investing, Senator Patrick, along with those already planned, that will address the potential security challenges in the coming decades. We are extending the life of all 6 of our Collins-class submarines. All 6 submarines will undergo life-of-type extension within the budget of $4.3 to $6.4 billion, extending the life of each submarine by 10 years. We're also investing in advanced long-range strike capabilities, including Tomahawk cruise missiles, long-range anti-ship missiles and joint air-to-surface standoff missiles. The Tomahawk cruise missiles will be fielded on our Hobart-class destroyers. They're going to enable our maritime assets to strike land targets at greater distance with better precision. The long-range anti-ship missiles for our F-18 Super Hornets can strike land and maritime targets. The JSAMs for our FA-18, 18F Super Hornets and in our future F-35s as well. We're enhancing our capabilities in offensive cyber, in hypersonic systems, in autonomous systems, in space capabilities. And we are confident, as I said at the beginning of your question, that these will address the potential security challenges in the coming decades as we move to the new submarine acquisition.
Expired. Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. So, greater tension, fewer submarines. Last week, Admiral Noonan conceded that by 2040, further extending the life of the Collins boats will leave them, and I quote, at far greater risk of detection. Will the government purchase off-the-shelf submarines to be built in Adelaide to serve as the Navy's Super Hornet interim solution to the F-35?
Minister.
That's a fascinating metaphor, an underwater Super Hornet F-35. Thank you, Senator Patrick, for your question. And I understand the point that you are raising, but with your experience, I would think you would appreciate how inefficient it might be for the Royal Australian Navy to try to operate 3 different classes of submarines simultaneously that require different basing, different crewing, different sustainment. So the Collins-class submarine life-of-type extension remains an essential element of the government's plan to maintain a potent and agile submarine capability for Australia. It has a core work package that includes updates and upgrades to diesel engines, to the main motor and power conversion equipment. Both defence and industry are continuing to progress Collins-class submarine life-of-type extension work on schedule to support the first boat that will need an extension. That's HMAS Farncombe, as you know, commencing in mid-2026. And ASC will lead the life-of-type extension design and implementation activities.
Minister, the time for the answer has expired. Senator Patrick, you have a second supplementary?
I do. We have a submarine construction workforce in disarray after the cancellation of the attack submarine program. The nuclear submarine built in Adelaide for delivery in 2040, by simple calculation, will commence construction in the mid-2030s. We don't have a workforce valley of death, rather we have a Grand Canyon. What will the government be doing to fill this Grand Canyon?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. I absolutely disagree with the proposition that Senator Patrick puts in relation to that. We are absolutely committed to ensuring that critical skills are retained in the shipbuilding sector in Australia. In fact, our commitment to continuous naval shipbuilding will support at least 15,000 Australian jobs by the end of the decade, and over 5,000 of those will be in South Australia. We know that the Osborne Naval Shipyard in South Australia is one of two principal shipyards. We know Osborne is hosting the construction of 9 Hunter-class frigates, plus major upgrades to the Navy's 3 AWDs and full-cycle docking of 6 Collins-class submarines. The Morrison government, frankly, has delivered on our commitment to provide, as I said, our servicewomen and men with the vital equipment they need to keep us safe in the budget. And what we are doing is being committed to finding a role for every skilled shipbuilding worker impacted by the attack class decision. We'll partner with ASC to manage and implement the new sovereign shipbuilding talent pool as well, which will redeploy the existing shipbuilding workforce throughout current and new shipbuilding programs.
Senator Abetz.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Attorney-General, Senator Cash. Can the Minister update the Senate on how Australia's national security remains under the real threat of foreign interference and espionage?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Payne. Oh, sorry, I missed the Attorney-General. Sorry, Attorney-General.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Abetz for the question, and I acknowledge his long interest in national security matters in Australia. And, Mr President, whilst the government has been focused on tackling the threat of COVID-19, we have never ever lost sight of the many challenges to our safety and security that exist in what we know is a rapidly changing security environment. As Australians would be aware, the threat environment constantly evolves. And in fact, it may come as a surprise to most Australians to know that the levels of espionage and foreign interference are higher now than during the Cold War. We know that there are foreign agents working with intent to damage our society. They want to undermine our security, and they want to interfere with the work of governments and ultimately with the work of our country. In their recent annual report, ASIO Director-General Mike Burgess said that espionage could well rival terrorism as a threat to our interests and to our safety. And of course, as members of parliament, it is incredibly important for us to remind ourselves that we can also be targets for foreign interference and espionage, and especially those who aspire to be ministers in any government. As the Director-General Mike Burgess said, foreign spies are attempting to obtain classified information about Australia's trade relationships, defence and intelligence capabilities. They are seeking to develop targeted relationships with current and former politicians and current and former security clearance holders. We should always be careful, Mr President, of underplaying the danger of being cavalier about the intentions of these types of people, of these characters and actors, should our paths cross with them as we go about our duties. As members of parliament, we must always remain ever vigilant to the threats posed by espionage and foreign interference.
Minister, the time has expired. Senator Abetz, a supplementary question.
I thank the attorney for her answer, albeit a very concerning answer. Can I ask, how is the government responding to the changing nature of foreign interference, and how do nefarious actors now work against our nation's interests?
Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, we know from our intelligence and our security agencies that foreign interference is changing, and unfortunately it is expanding, especially with the ubiquity of digital technology now right across the globe. We know in particular that some communities are targeted by foreign actors in an attempt to recruit and even unknowingly push foreign nations' interests in and around Australia. And that is why, as a government, we have strengthened Australia's capacity to defend against foreign interference with legislative tools. These key pieces of legislation, they are helping our intelligence and our law enforcement agencies continue to have the legislative framework and the tools that they need to appropriately deal with and disrupt these actors. We will continue to make any changes necessary to ensure that, as a nation, we can respond to changing threats from foreign actors and protect Australia's interests.
Senator Abetz, second supplementary question.
Can the minister also update the Senate on how the government continues to support our vital intelligence and security agencies to target and disrupt foreign interference and protect our country's interests?
Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And our government has invested over $145 million since 2018-19 to bolster our response to foreign interference in Australia. Mr President, in the 2021-22 budget, we allocated the largest long-term investment in ASIO to address the complex and dynamic national security environment with $1.3 billion over the next decade. We've also passed legislation that will ensure that the Foreign Minister, on the advice of our security agencies, can veto agreements with foreign countries struck by state and local governments, as well as with universities. This legislation will ensure that any deal with a foreign country is in accordance with Australia's national interest. Mr President, as I've said, we know that foreign actors are now using cyber tactics to further interfere with Australia's interests, and that's why we've made a huge investment with the Australian Signals Directorate.
Senator Grogan.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. Mr Morrison's original transition plan, which was based on an outbreak of only 30 cases, estimates that 12,000 people will end up in hospital, including more than 2,700 in ICU, with over 1,400 dying. We've since seen more than 1,000 cases a day across the country. How many hospitalisations, ICU admissions and deaths does the Morrison-Joyce government now expect as states begin to open up?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Grogan, for a question. First question. Mr President, the National Plan is designed to provide protection and provide advice to governments, state, territory and Commonwealth, as to the parameters with which we can start to reopen the national economy, Mr President. And so once we reached 70% of the population fully vaccinated, which we have now, we can start to take some measures, and you've seen those things commencing in the states and territories, Mr President. Of course, the whole purpose of the national plan is to minimise the number of infections of the virus, Mr President, and also subsequent to that hospitalisations and presentations at ICUs, and of course to minimise the number of people who pass away. So the whole objective is to minimise those numbers, Mr President. That's the point of the plan, and that's why we continue to encourage Australians to access vaccines. We've reached 70% of the population over 16 who are vaccinated. We encourage more Australians in every walk of life, in every state and territory, to go out and access the vaccine so that we can continue to do that, Mr President, because the whole purpose of the exercise is to minimise the number of cases that we have in the community, and that, of course, minimises the number of Australians who may be hospitalised, Mr President, or minimises the number of people who may be subject to ICU, or, Mr President, those, unfortunately, who might pass away. Mr President, we know that there will be COVID circulating in the community. The best way, Mr President, that Australians can protect themselves, protect their families and protect the communities, Mr President, is to get vaccinated, and the more people who are vaccinated, Mr President, the less people who will be subject to the virus, its spread and, of course, hospitalisation and ICU.
Senator Grogan, a supplementary question.
Senator Colbeck, the Australian Medical Association has warned that the shortage of hospital beds, overcrowded emergency departments and longer waits were, and I quote, risking the lives of all Australians. Why has the Morrison-Joyce government refused to act on the urgent calls for funding from all state and territory health ministers before it's too late?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank Senator Grogan for the question. Mr. President,
Order on my left.
Mr. President, the Australian government—
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Order. The minister had not even commenced his answer when the interjection started. Interjections are always disorderly. Minister, you have the call. Order. Senator Ayres, I literally just ruled. Senator Colbeck, Minister, you have the call.
Thank you. It's a bit of a record, Mr. President. I actually got to 7 seconds once before I was stopped, so to get it before I start is not doing too bad. Mr. President, all states and territories, as a part of their conversations with the Australian government, have indicated they have adequate capacity to meet demand based on the Doherty modelling, supplemented by their own modelling, Mr. President. And during COVID, the Australian government has invested, along with the states and territories, into the health system just for COVID in excess of $6.6 billion, Mr. President. $6.6 billion, and that funding has been put in, particularly with respect to the state health systems, on a 50-50 basis, Mr. President. So $6.6 billion invested by the Australian government in support of the states and territories in fighting
Minister,
COVID.
the time for the answer has expired. Senator Grogan, a second supplementary question.
Thank you. AMA President Dr Omar Khorshid has said, and I quote, "Once COVID comes in, the only way we can look after people with COVID is to stop looking after all the other people that we are currently looking after." Will the minister guarantee Australians will be safe?
Minister.
They're all there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the Australian government moved very early to put in place a number of measures to support the health system in the event of significant outbreaks of COVID. And there have been a continuation of measures, obviously, that have been undertaken since then. One of the first things, Mr. President, that we did to support the public health system was the private hospitals agreement, Mr. President, which allowed those private hospitals to support the public health system in the case of a huge surge in numbers. Of course, Mr. President, as we vaccinate more Australians, as more Australians take up the opportunity to vaccinate, to have a vaccination, that again reduces the possibilities of COVID transmitting through the community. It protects individuals from serious illness, hospitalisation and death. That's the point of the vaccination process, and that is also factored into the Doherty modelling that is dictating our opening up process, Mr. President. So all of this carefully calculated and agreed with the states.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Davey.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources and Water, Senator Ruston. Can the Minister please advise the Senate how the Liberals and Nationals plan to position Australia as a leading supplier of critical minerals and rare earth elements, and how this will create jobs and boost investment in mining industries while meeting the growing global demand for new energy technologies required in a modern economy?
The Minister representing the Minister for Resources and Water, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Davey for her question, because Senator Davey understands that the coalition government is a government that backs our minerals and our resources sector. Critical minerals and rare earth elements are a really, really exciting new chapter for our resource sector, and Australia is extraordinarily blessed. We have some of the largest deposits of rare minerals and critical minerals in the world. We've got the second largest reserve of lithium, the sixth largest rare earths reserve, and substantial reserves of cobalt, magnesium, tungsten and zirconium. So critical minerals have a broad range of applications, as we know, ranging from things as simple as batteries and mobile phones, but going up to things like wind turbines and even fighter jets. The application is extraordinary. And that's why, as a coalition government, we are backing this sector, because we understand that the opportunity for Australia is absolutely huge. We've put together a $2 billion loan facility, the Critical Minerals Facility, which will ensure that Australia remains at the absolute forefront of the emerging opportunities in the global resources sector. And our loan facility will help unearth critical minerals and get developments off the ground. In doing so, these projects will help secure vital supplies of resources needed to drive a technology-led energy recovery. These materials will be used in advanced technologies such as renewable energy, aerospace, defence, electric vehicles, communications, telecommunications and agri-tech, which I'm sure Senator Davey is particularly excited about. The lithium industry alone is forecast to be worth $400 billion globally by 2030. But in addition to our global resources strategy, we will also identify new markets for critical minerals and facilitate opportunities for expanding trade. We must ensure that Australia harnesses these new markets in the interests of all Australians.
Senator Davey, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Minister. And I am very passionate about Australia's growing critical minerals mining. And can the minister outline who will benefit from the government's investment in critical minerals?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, everybody benefits from this activity. Studies indicate that, as I said, global demand for critical minerals needed for clean technology applications are going to grow exponentially over the coming decades. Australia is well placed to become a really reliable supplier of these critical minerals. Who will benefit? It's very, very simple, Senator Davey. Our investment will mean three key things: more jobs, more expert options and a stronger economy for Australia. Jobs for the next generation of engineers, tradies, apprentices who build and operate these mines. Jobs in construction and infrastructure development to help get the product to market. Jobs in defence, aerospace, high-end manufacturing and other sectors that will use our critical minerals. Jobs to support new and emerging technologies and overall more support for our regional communities who supply these critical minerals to the rest of the world. In short, Senator Davey, everyone will benefit in Australia.
Senator Davey, a second supplementary question.
Thank you. And more specifically for my interests, how will the export and potential value add of rare minerals benefit local towns and regional centres like Parkes and Cobar and the southern western districts of New South Wales where critical minerals are mined?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, there are a number of areas in Australia that are already seeing benefits from critical minerals, such as the Parkes precinct in your home state of New South Wales, Senator Davey. The New South Wales government estimates that through continued investment in critical minerals, more than 2,300 construction and ongoing jobs could be created for central New South Wales. The 9 most advanced critical mineral projects in Australia could support 7,000 jobs and will unlock nearly $8 billion in investment for regional and rural communities alone. Australia's current battery industry is estimated to already contribute $1.3 billion to our GDP and 6,000 jobs, mostly in regional Australia. The Future Batteries Industry CRC estimated diversified battery industries could add 34,700 new jobs in Australia and $7.4 billion to Australia's economy, much of which will be the benefit of rural and regional Australia.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie. The President of the National Farmers Federation, Fiona Simpson, has warned that if Australia does not adopt a net zero by 2050 emissions target, it would, quote, punish farmers and that, quote, we can't afford to squander this opportunity. Is Ms Simpson wrong?
The Minister representing the Deputy Prime Minister, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much. And it's fantastic to have Senator Watt ask a question about agriculture. He's been here a while, talks a big game from Brisbane on behalf of rural and regional Queensland, but it's fantastic. And I hope he's also met with the NFF's, well, you know, I'm sorry, I'm from the south, Brisbane, Gold Coast, it's all the same to me. He talks a big game. I'm hoping you have met with AgForce, who is the Queensland representative on the NFF, because they actually have very strong views of this particular issue. They are very, very clear. Whilst obviously agriculture is making great inroads into lowering emissions and different production systems, whether it's the grains industry and carbon sequestration, whether it is the beef industry committing to net zero by 2030, without a carbon tax,
Minister,
I might say, which your
Minister,
government—
please resume your seat. Senator Watt, on a point of order.
On relevance, Mr President, I know Senator Mackenzie isn't close enough to the farming community to know that there's a difference
Senator
between
Watt,
the NFF
Senator
and
Watt,
AgForce.
points of order.
Our question
Senator
is about—
Watt, sit down. Points of order are not an opportunity to make gratuitous comments across the chamber. You have the call, but please make a point of order.
On relevance, the question was about the National Farmers Federation rather than any other farming group that the minister chooses to talk about.
Senator Watt, Senator Watt. Senator Canavan, on the point of order.
Thank you, Mr President. On the point of order, if Senator Watt actually knew something about the agricultural industry, he would know that AgForce is a member of NFF. That AgForce is a member of NFF, so it's exactly relevant. It's exactly relevant, but he knows nothing about farmers.
Seat. Senator Wong. Senator Canavan, resume your seat. Senator Wong, on the point of order. Silence. Order in the chamber. Order. Order. Senator Wong, on the point of order.
Well, Mr President, I'd ask you to reflect after question time. You did deal very sternly with Senator Watt very quickly. Senator Canavan continued to ignore your— I haven't finished my submission, Mr President.
Order on my right.
We just want even-handedness, sir.
Senator Wong, Senator Wong, Senator Wong, I was calling Senator Canavan to order. Senator Gallagher. Senator Watt, had you completed your point of order? I'm listening. Order on my right. I was listening very carefully to the answer. You've had the chance to direct the minister back to the question. I do not believe I need to do more than that at this point. I am listening carefully to the answer. Minister, you have the call.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And speak to Fiona Simpson, the President of the NFF, regularly. I also speak to Georgie Somerset, the President of your own Farmers Federation, a member of the National Farmers Federation, Georgie Somerset, President of AgForce. And you know what? They've made very, very clear to me, to the Coalition and to the National Party room in the context of this debate, is that farmers have done their fair share, that they have done the heavy lifting and that they want that recognised. And you know why they did the heavy lifting? Because of the Queensland Government's native vegetation laws. It is because of the Palaszczuk state Labor government's—
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr President. Point of order, direct relevance.
Order. Order.
Thank you, Mr President. Point of order, direct relevance. The question went to a statement by the President of the NFF as to if Australia doesn't adopt a net zero by 2050, it will punish farmers, and whether or not Ms Simpson was wrong. I didn't intervene. I didn't raise a point of order earlier about the lengthy discussion about AgForce, etc. This is now an entirely different subject.
Senator Mackenzie.
I've been
Order on my right. Order on my right. Senator
You forget
Wong.
that I was Shadow Minister for Trade. A lot of people I had to talk to.
Order.
You remember that.
This is not an opportunity for discussion
I'm
across
very
the
happy
chamber.
to answer questions. I might actually stick
Senator
to the
Wong.
question.
Senator Wong,
Direct
please
relevance.
complete your
Thank
point
you.
of order.
Yes, well, I think I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Canavan, on the point of order.
The minister was clearly referring to the arguments that the National Farmers Federation have made this week around their position, which does relate to tree clearing and native vegetation laws around this country.
Senator Wong, I'm prepared to make a ruling. I believe that while Senator Mackenzie has not been in breach of standing orders, I am listening carefully to the answer. I do think there is a risk of straying, but I do not believe that Senator Mackenzie has strayed from the question. Senator Mackenzie, you have the call.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I think I did touch all the high notes. The National Farmers Federation, Fiona Simpson, net zero. What farmers are absolutely sick and tired of is a Labor Party that doesn't understand the contribution that they make and understand that they actually want to be compensated and recognised for the contribution they've already made to the reduction in emissions in this country.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Watt, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Minerals Council of Australia, which represents resources companies including BHP, Rio Tinto and Whitehaven Coal, has endorsed net zero by 2050, saying the minerals sector has confidence a net zero emissions by 2050 target can be reached. Is the Minerals Council of Australia wrong?
Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very, very much. And I do note in putting their support forward for an aspirational target of net zero by 2050, the Minerals Council a couple of weeks ago made it very, very clear that we can't do that without carbon capture and storage technology being implemented in this country. So we look forward to the Labor Party supporting National Party amendments to the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which will do exactly that, which will actually ensure that the dirty deal done by Gillard and Brown to establish the Clean Energy Corporation will actually fund carbon capture and storage.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Wong on a point of order.
Well, there certainly are dirty deals at the moment, and Senator Mackenzie could talk about them. But
Senator
my
Wong,
point of order
again.
My point of order.
Senator Rennick.
I'm happy to give leave for Senator Rennick to speak.
Senator Wong, this is not.
You want to do that? We will give you. If you stand up and seek leave, we will give you leave.
Senator Wong, resume your seat. Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Wong. Points of order are not an opportunity to debate matters across the chamber, nor for interjections from my right. Senator Wong, Senator Wong, Senator Rennick, Senator Watt. I will give Senator Wong the opportunity to restate her point of order. Senator Wong. Have you finished, Senator Wong? All right. I am listening carefully to the answer. You've had the chance to bring the minister back to the question. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I was saying, carbon capture and storage technologies, along with nuclear technologies, are recognised by the International Energy Agency as the two technologies which are actually going to be essential to getting to a low-emissions future. So I actually look forward to the Labor Party and the Greens supporting 21st century technologies that will—
Minister, resume your seat. Now, okay, if the chamber agrees, we can do the supplementary question, the final supplementary question. There is no objection. Senator Watt, second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the comments of the National Farmers Federation and the Minerals Council of Australia, when will the fake farmers and the fake miners in the National Party listen to the real farmers and the real miners who support net zero by 2050?
Minister.
OK, well, you know, I am a little concerned, Mr. President, that the amount of point of orders that have been taken during this answer have meant that I actually don't get asked my Dixer by Senator Matt Canavan on the fabulous work we're doing in Queensland for the beef industry, and Blair and Josie Angus up at. But I love the fact that Senator Watt thinks it's too cute by half talking about fake and real farmers. I would put $100 on the President's table that you have never sat down with a real farmer in your life. I am going to ask Georgie Somerset, the President of AgForce, to come and pay you a little visit so she can actually talk you through what your outrageous state Labor government has done to Queensland farmers, and that we are meeting and beating our emission targets as a result of their hard work. We will always stand up for farmers.
Minister, your time has expired. We have now hit a hard marker. Sorry, I just need to quickly consult with the. I understand that Senator Smith is seeking leave of the chamber to do committee memberships. Is leave granted? The President has received a letter nominating senators to be members of committees. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I seek leave to move a motion to appoint senators to a committee.
Is leave granted? I'll try that again. Is leave granted? Senator
Very much.
Smith.
Mr. President, I move that Senator Scarr be appointed to the Economics, Legislation and References Committee, Senator McGrath be appointed to the Procedure Committee and Senator Van be appointed to the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties.
The question is that motion be agreed to. Those that opinion say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. Senator Hume.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the order for production of documents discussed during a public hearing of the Rural, Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee on the 19th of July 2021, agreed to in this place yesterday. I note that the documents sought under this order were also sought under the Order for Production of Documents number 1217. I also note that the Minister for Communications, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and the Arts, through me, responded to that order on the 2nd of September 2021. With regard to the clauses 1A and D of this order, and further to the Minister's correspondence to this place on the 2nd of September 2021, I am advised that the documents subject to this order, reliant on the description during a public hearing of the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee on the 19th of July 2021, cannot be tabled, as no document matching this description has been seen by either the Minister, his office or his department. With regards to spreadsheets sought under clauses 1B and C of this order, and further to the Minister's correspondence to the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee of the 4th of August 2021, and to this place of the 2nd of September 2021, I remind the Senate that the documents subject to these clauses of the order are subject to a public interest immunity claim on the grounds that the release of those documents would disclose the deliberations of Cabinet. And I table that document relating to the order of production of documents concerning the Urban Congestion Fund.
Thank you. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to take note of the minister's answer.
Go
Thank you. Well, Mr. President, you can set your watch to it. The Senate orders the Morrison-Joyce government to produce documents relating to a dodgy grant, and the Morrison-Joyce government just flat-out refuses to deliver. They are shameless, are they not? They're addicted to secrecy, allergic to accountability. There is no standard so low that they can't limbo underneath it. They think they are above the law. Of course, Senator Patrick points out there are blind trusts. Perhaps, as we see in the House yesterday, there is a new low standard. Well, here we go. We know that the Morrison-Joyce government members, they break the rules that they don't care about and they change the rules that they can. The Senate ordered that the minister lay on the table emails, spreadsheets, maps related to the car park Rort scandal. We know from the ANAO that the projects under the Car Parks Rort program were picked from a list titled the top 20 marginal electorates. You can't get more blatant than that. We know that hundreds of millions of dollars was shoveled out the door on projects announced during the 2019 federal election campaign. And we know that 77% of the car park sites ended up in coalition electorates and not in areas where they were most needed. The ANAO found out that, surprise, surprise, Senators, that none of the 47 project sites selected for funding commitments were proposed by the Department of Infrastructure. None of them. None of them. This is egregious. This is wholesale rorting. Wholesale rorting. The government that Mr. Morrison leads is littered with examples of scandal, rorting and waste. I have lost track, Madam Deputy President, of the number of ministers who've been exposed for their misconduct and their dodgy dealings. Taylor, McKenzie, Colbeck, Cash, Lay, Dutton, Fletcher, Robert, Tudge, Hunt, Rustin, Reynolds and Porter. All of these ministers have been linked to one scandal or another. I wish car park rorts was an anomaly, but this is a new normal for the Morrison-Joyce government. They spend taxpayer money like it is Liberal National Party money. The sheer quantum of misconduct by those opposite is simply staggering. I don't think it's about to get any better, by the way. There's a federal election right around the corner, and this tired 8-year-old Liberal National government doesn't have any other tricks up its sleeve. There's never been a better time, in fact, to be a colour-coded spreadsheet than under Mr. Morrison and his mates. Ann Webster, the member from Mali, had an uncharacteristic moment of honesty from the Morrison-Joyce government, but she's new. She might grow out of that. Anyway, she had an uncharacteristic moment of honesty when she belled the cat on the Building Better Regions rorts. She revealed that coalition MPs can basically just ask for any money they want, regardless of the rules of the grant. Depending on the whims of the minister on any given day, they might just get that money. They might just get that money. Well, I've been in politics long enough to know that there is a view out there in the community that grift and graft and dodgy deals are just par for the course, the nature of the beast, the cost of doing business. I think the former Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, in fact said, "What's wrong with pork barreling? Everybody does it." She might have a different view about that these days, by the way. The voters supposedly factored in. This view is supposedly factored in by voters because, quote, all political parties do it and all politicians are in it for themselves. But what is clear from car park rorts, sports rorts, Building Better Regions rorts, all 22 of the slush funds in Mr. Morrison's recent budget, is that we are experiencing an all-time low for government accountability in this country. This is uniquely bad. We've had grants for rural and regional communities handed to projects that are literally next door to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We've had sports clubs and marginal seats given money for female change room facilities when they have no women's teams. We've had funding for community safety grants cut so the minister could spend cash in an election announcement. The behaviour of the Morrison-Joyce government is brazen. Mr. Morrison appears to have a blatant disregard for the rules and institutions of our democracy. The Australian people have a right to know what their government gets up to. They have a right to know how their money is being spent. They have a right to expect a higher standard from their elected officials. But Mr. Morrison and his mates, they don't even try to hide it anymore. Asked about the car park rorts earlier this year, the minister representing the Prime Minister in this place, Senator Birmingham, simply shrugged and he said, "Look, the Australian people had their chance and they voted the government back in at the last election." They're not even trying to hide this anymore. Why attempt, by the way, to defend the indefensible? You kind of got to admire the hide of the whole thing. They're just hoping that no one pays close enough attention to their bad behaviour. As long as they get re-elected, what do they care? Well, it's a disgraceful attitude. It is beyond contempt, particularly when we see communities that need community safety funding not getting it, particularly when we see areas that are affected by congestion neglected for a car park because they just happen to be in a Labor-held seat. Frankly, though, people are catching on. Look at what we saw yesterday in the House of Representatives. For the first time since Federation, a government has voted against the Speaker. Voted against a motion the Speaker has given precedence to, namely that former Minister Christian Porter should be investigated for his failure to declare a $1 million blind trust. We're all public servants in this place. We all have to follow the rules. We all have to be accountable to our constituents and the broader public. Christian Porter's decision to accept this money constitutes, without declaring it, constitutes at least an investigation. It looks like an outrageous breach of office, and he should be investigated. And that was the view of the Speaker, a Liberal Party colleague of Mr. Porter's, who ruled there was a prima facie case for referral, and Labor supported the referral. It was Mr. Morrison, the Prime Minister, it was Mr. Joyce, the Deputy Prime Minister, and all of their mates in the government who didn't. They held their nose and they voted against the Speaker for the first time in nearly 120 years in a blatant display of disregard for transparency and accountability. It's extraordinary. It is quite literally without precedent in this country. The member for Pearce is being protected by the Prime Minister. It's the only explanation here. He's the only Western Australian this Prime Minister has ever stood up for, and that speaks volumes for this Prime Minister. The Morrison government will hound people to their death with robo-debt, but they'll help a disgraced former minister cover up his $1 million blind trust. No wonder they don't want to fund a federal ICAC. No wonder they don't want to even present the legislation for a national anti-corruption commission. No wonder they don't want to answer questions on notice. No wonder they don't want to abide by orders from the Senate to produce documents. This Prime Minister doesn't like answering questions because he knows the Australian people won't like the answers. If the documents requested by the Senate today could make the government look good, then we'd have seen them by now. So what are they hiding? What are they hiding? When voter cynicism in government grows, politicians like Mr. Morrison flourish. Blokes like Mr. Morrison have made a career out of exceeding ever-shrinking expectations. The only way we can restore the Australian people's faith in our democracy is by showing this lot the door. Because unless we get a government that is serious about a national anti-corruption commission, this type of rorting and scandals and blind trusts and disregarding the Speaker and not answering questions on notice and not producing documents is simply going to continue. After 8 long years of this tired Liberal national government, the Australian people deserve a government that is on their side. So let me be clear, in this chamber and with the Australian people, an Albanese Labor government will deliver a national anti-corruption commission, one with teeth, one that will bring transparency and accountability so long lacking in this tired 8-year-old Liberal national government. We will bring that to the national level, because the Australian people deserve to know what's being done with their money. They deserve to have accountability and transparency in their government, and they deserve a government that is on their side.
Thank you, Senator Keneally. Senator Rice.
Thanks, Deputy President. I was so disappointed with this minister's response to my order for production of documents. Incredibly disappointed, but not surprised. This government has got form. They have got so much form with hiding information, hiding the fact that they make decisions based on their political interests, what suits their interests, making decisions based on the interests of them, their mates, big business, making decisions based on what they think is going to take to win them seats, rather than what is in the interests of ordinary Australians. This is the second time that the minister has failed to present the documents that were set out in this order. And I was particularly disappointed that they didn't even attempt to give any extra reason as to why they shouldn't give these documents. They basically simply resent a letter stating that in relation to some of the requests that neither Minister Fletcher nor his office nor the department have seen the documents. May I remind people that this is despite the fact that these documents were referred to by the Australian National Audit Office at a hearing of the Rural and Regional Transport Committee. The ANAO aren't making it up. The ANAO are there as the Audit Office to inquire into actions and programs of department. They don't make stuff up. The Auditor General, the Auditor told us that there was this document that referred to the top 20 marginal seats. And yet Minister Fletcher and Minister Hume, through him, are saying that no one happens to have seen these documents. So I really want to ask, how closely have they looked? I mean, their letter says the documents aren't to hand. I mean, how convenient. Maybe they just accidentally fell into a shredder or something. And of course, what makes this so upsetting is that this isn't the first time. This government has got form. Let's take us back to sports rorts. In January 2020, when he was asked about sports rorts at the Press Club, the Prime Minister said, "All we did was to provide information based on the representations made to us, as every Prime Minister has done." And in March 2020, the Prime Minister said, "We provided information based on the representations made to us, and that included information about other funding options or programs relevant to the project proposals." It wasn't until 2 months later, in May 2020, after significant new information had come to light, that the Prime Minister admitted that they'd been involved in providing approvals for those sports rorts programs. The only authority sought from the Prime Minister's office and from me was in relation to announcements, they said. But subsequently, what we learnt through the committee process was that Minister Mackenzie's office had sent dozens of spreadsheets to the Prime Minister's office, had sought approvals for particular rounds of funding, and the sports rorts funding was expanded after a meeting between Minister Mackenzie and the Prime Minister, following spreadsheets that were sent to the Prime Minister's office. So let's be very clear. When it comes to hiding information, being slippery with language and conveniently forgetting things until they're forced to acknowledge them, this government has got form. And when it comes to the information that's in these documents, this is not the end of the matter. There is a long way to go. We've got Senate estimates next week. We've got a committee into these car park rorts, and I'm confident that more information is going to come to light. I mean, the refusal by this government to be transparent with the truth doesn't change our commitment to actually getting to the truth and to hold them accountable, to hold this government accountable. We will use the Senate. We will use the information that we've got from the ANAO. I mean, this rorting of this grant scheme, it matters on multiple levels. As I've been saying, it's just consistent with the government using government processes, using government funding, using grant processes to be serving their own political interests rather than the interests of the community. But it also matters when it comes to just good governance, making good decisions. I mean, I want to talk about the transport policy before going on in a bit more detail about the corruption. I mean, this whole grant fund was the Urban Congestion Fund. The whole point of this grant fund is supposedly to be busting congestion. Let me share one of the submissions that we've received into the car parks inquiry that we've just set up on this issue from the University of Melbourne transport experts. And they say that after years of research on how do you solve urban congestion, the overwhelming conclusion of these investigations is that congestion reduction has failed because of the bias to solutions based on expanding road capacity, Put simply, the experience all over the world since the 1970s confirms that additional capacity induces new demand. This ensures congestion returns to or exceeds initial levels very soon after additional capacity is added. In the case of bottlenecks, which is a specific focus of the Urban Congestion Fund, when one bottleneck is removed, the choke point simply moves to the next. It is now widely accepted by transport planners that building additional road capacity is not a cost-effective means to reduce congestion. More success has been achieved through measures that address demand, such as pricing reform and strategic land use planning. Sadly, we haven't seen that road pricing reform, despite years of waiting for it. And so it then goes to what is so tragically wrong with this rort, that building new car parks, just like building new roads, will not solve congestion. And when we ask instead of estimates, what's the justification for even spending money on car parks in order to solve congestion, the officials, of course, had no clear answer how they identified these car park projects or how they linked into broader infrastructure planning, including the work done by Infrastructure Australia. But of course we know why that was, because the officials were trying to have to pretend that there was some rhyme and reason and semblance of connection with transport policy behind them. But it was because the whole entire program is a rort. They didn't pick the car parks on any kind of sensible plan. Basically, they set around yet another spreadsheet with a list of electorates each project was in. So it wasn't at all a surprise to learn that the same staffer who was involved in sports rorts was involved with the car park rorts. And we also know that we saw government moving projects between programs, so shifting them from the Community Support Infrastructure Fund to the Community Development Grants Fund and the Urban Congestion Fund. So it seems increasingly clear that this isn't a case of just a single rort multiplied multiple times. It is basically the Prime Minister's office serving as a coordination point between the Liberal Party election campaign and different programs that are being run across different portfolios. This is one mega-rort being run out of the Prime Minister's office. And that's why the wish lists that we use for sports rorts mattered. They weren't just wish lists for changing rooms, they were wish lists for election commitment projects across multiple types of projects. And as Michael West Media has noted, often these projects, particularly the car parks, follow a pattern. First the MP organises a petition to harvest contact details, and then, hey presto, suddenly they've got a grant to announce right before the election. Look, it's almost as if there was a systematic, coordinated process to use public announcements to bolster their election chances without doing the hard work of genuine consultation and policy development. And the scale of the Liberal Party's approach to these funds is so awful that there are layers of misspending. We saw that, of course, in New South Wales with the recent ICAC inquiry in New South Wales. One of Mike Baird's staffers questioned the advocacy by the then Treasurer of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, and questioned why they were spending money in a safe seat. Clearly they saw the value in spending public funding in marginal seats for their electoral benefit. But on top of that layer of corruption, the former Treasurer wanted a pet project, and entirely coincidentally it appears it was in the electorate of someone she was in a relationship with. The sad truth is, with this government, it's genuinely hard keeping track of all the different programs they've tried to rort. Sports rorts, car park rorts, the Community Development Grants Fund, and the list goes on. It's exactly why we need a federal ICAC with teeth. It's exactly why we need to have something that goes to the heart of the corruption of this government, highlighting the inaction of this government, the refusal to pass an ICAC, despite the fact that the Greens bill for a federal ICAC passed the Senate 2 years ago and is there on the books, ready to be implemented if we only had an honest rather than a corrupt government.
Thank you, Senator Rice. Your time has expired. If there are no more speakers, I intend to put the motion. So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Keneally to take note be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against, I believe the ayes have it. Minister.
Thanks, Deputy President. Deputy President, I seek leave to move a motion relating to the consideration of legislation.
Is leave granted? There being no objection, leave is granted. Minister.
Thanks, Deputy President. I move that A, the hours of meeting be 9:30 a.m. till adjournment, B, the following bills be called on following motions to take note of answers and have precedence over all other business till determined. Customs Amendment, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement Implementation Bill 2021 and a related bill, and Financial Sector Reform, Hayne Royal Commission Response, Better Advice Bill 2021, and C, divisions may take place after 4:30 p.m, and D, the Senate adjourn without debate at the conclusion of the general business debate, which will be considered for not more than 60 minutes.
Thank you, Minister. So the question is that the motion is moved by the Minister be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Senator Wong.
Thank you. I seek leave to move a motion relating to the failure of the government to comply with order for the production of documents number 1251.
Is leave granted? Yes, thank you. Minister.
Thanks, Chair. The government will not deny leave. We sought to deny leave earlier today in relation to this motion. I recognise the vote of the Senate at that time, which agreed to suspend standing orders at that stage. And we won't prolong debate in the Senate. The government still believes that consideration of this is just a stunt by the opposition, completely unnecessary on their behalf, and in doing so is simply seeking to further politicise debates in relation to climate change and emissions reduction, and is seeking to get ahead of matters that are rightly being considered by the government to take a fully informed position to the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. However, recognising that the will of the Senate has already been expressed, we won't object by way of leave denial at this time.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I move the motion which has been circulated in the chamber, which I'm happy to read if the chamber so wishes, but relates to the failure of the government to respond to the order of production of documents 1251 moved by Senator Patrick Canavan, and requires the Minister representing the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction to attend the Senate immediately to provide an explanation. The terms of the motion have been circulated in the chamber.
Thank you. So the question is that the motion is moved by Senator Wong be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senator Davey.
I draw attention to the state of the chamber.
Yes, quorum required, I believe. Ring the bells. Quorum's been reached. Thank you. So I'll call you Senator Seselja. Thank you, Senator Seselja.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. Acting Deputy President. I table a response to the order of production of documents, if I could. And I'll just have a copy with me as well.
Please continue.
Yeah, thank you, Acting Deputy President. I might just read the table document. So, as Minister representing the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction, I write with regard to the Senate Order for Production of Documents number 1251, moved by Senator Patrick and agreed by the Senate on 20 October 2021 on the matter of modelling relating to the government's emission reduction strategy. Noting sensitivities incumbent on a request for Cabinet documents and the time frame provided to respond, I advise that more time will be required to comply with the order. A more detailed response will be provided to the Senate by Friday 29 October, consistent with Standing Order 166, and I enclose a letter from the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction confirming this advice.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Wong.
Thank you. Pursuant to the motion, I rise to take note of that response and make a few points. One, just to be very clear, that the government spent some time today filibustering and running procedural games to avoid having a vote on the motion that they've just now had to have a vote on. And the reason the government conceded that vote is it knew that a number of its senators were, to their credit, prepared to cross the floor to support a motion requiring the minister to attend. Recall that the order for production of documents that is the subject of this motion, that was not complied with by Minister Seselja, was not complied with by the government, was a motion in fact supported by Senator Matt Canavan. So a government senator moving a motion against his own government or requiring his own government to provide the economic modelling that they have been talking about. So that is all of the shenanigans today were to avoid a vote that the government has just conceded. So just to be very clear what has occurred, Senator Canavan made clear he was prepared to cross the floor, as I have to say was the private indication from another of other Liberal senators. This is a government utterly divided. But I do want to make some comments. Senator McKenzie, how are you? Yes, I do want to make some brief comments, if I may, about the approach of the government to secrecy and the approach to the government to transparency and the approach to the government to accountability. The government want to keep this modelling secret because they know that they have cost Australia billions of dollars by standing in the way of action on climate and renewables. And it's not the only secret, of course, that we know the Morrison-Joyce government is determined to keep from Australians. Recall that yesterday Mr Morrison got every one of his MPs to vote to protect Christian Porter and his secret donations. But he can't get his divided government to vote for net zero emissions by 2050. The fact is, Mr Morrison never takes responsibility. He leaves it to others on vaccines, on hospitals, on quarantine, on bushfires, on climate, on renewables, and he's not even in the room when his government's policy on climate and renewables is being decided by Mr Joyce and the Nationals. But when it comes to protecting Mr Porter, that's a job Mr Morrison puts his back into. Well, if only Mr Morrison put the same effort into fighting for the Australian people as he puts into fighting for Christian Porter. Mr Porter. If only he put as much effort into tackling climate change and ensuring we support renewables as he puts into protecting Mr Porter. The whole reason for this government's existence over 8 long years has been to stand in the way of action on climate and renewables. And make no mistake about it, any deal that Mr Morrison comes up with now, with Mr Joyce's support, will be nothing but political spin to get Mr Morrison through Glasgow and to get him through the election. But I'd say to the government, Australians are on to you. Australians are on to you. They've seen what Mr Morrison is like and they know he isn't the real deal.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Deputy President, and I also rise to take note of the answer. Well, it would be too easy, wouldn't it, just to be wearily resigned to the secrecy, the endless and naked politicking from this tired, clapped-out government. Because we've had 8 years of it, haven't we? Years ago, the government tried hiding the modelling that related to its tax cuts, and it hasn't let up since. We've seen relentless rorting. Car parks, sports rorts, all with accompanying colour-coded spreadsheets. and when queried about it, a bullying, uncompromising assertion that this is fine, that this is what government looks like. Yesterday, in the other place, the government voted to protect Mr Porter from scrutiny, an unprecedented decision to shield a sitting government MP from the scrutiny of the Privileges Committee about an unprecedented circumstance where that person sought to establish a legal mechanism to hide his financial interests. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And this morning here in this place, it's just more of the same, isn't it? We spent hours on this morning. People remember we're all here in the chamber waiting, while these people voted to scuttle an attempt by a member of their own coalition, Senator Canavan, to access important modelling about possible climate commitments and the economic consequences of those commitments. This government says it's all about the economy. It says it's all about the economic interests of regional Australia. It says it's all about Australia's economic future. But it's not interested in a serious public debate about those questions. It's not interested in a serious debate about our future, and, as demonstrated this morning, will do anything possible to prevent such a debate taking place here in this chamber, here in the very place where such a debate ought to be happening. Because it matters, doesn't it? This kind of secrecy is just wrong, and it's reflective of the culture of the government, a relentless pursuit, an unending pursuit of political solutions, of deal-making, to what are genuine policy problems. And it's all tied up together, isn't it? Because it's easier to do a deal in secret. It's much easier when there are just a handful of actors in the room, a nice little subcommittee of cabinet, just a handful of people who can cut a deal. Cut a deal to shunt money off in one direction in exchange for another kind of commitment that may or may not be in the national interest. And when you cut your deal, it's a lot easier, isn't it, to spin it when there are very few facts about the content of that agreement, very few facts about the content of the negotiation, very few facts about what has actually been agreed and the consequences for Australia and Australians. Much easier to spin when there aren't facts out there to contradict your narrative. But it's not what the national interest requires. This is a big and serious and consequential challenge. It's one that our peers all around the globe are willing to take on. And around the globe, when we do see serious climate action, it's not the product of secret meetings, some new sort of augmented schedule to the coalition deal between the Liberals and the Nationals. Serious climate action is a consequence of bringing people along. Serious economic reform requires a conversation with the very communities whose lives will change, an honest and open conversation that reassures people that you have their interests at heart, not just making it through, skating through to the next election, keeping your job, keeping your ministry, keeping your cosy spot, keeping your big car. What's needed is a serious public conversation to grapple with an existential challenge, and one that every serious country in the world, all of our peers, are grappling with at this very moment. Mr Morrison is going to go to Glasgow, he says. He should go with a serious plan to take Australia into the future, one that has been the subject of public discussion, and the pathetic, endless attempts to reduce this to a grubby deal do
Senator
no one any
McAllister.
credit.
Your time has expired. Senator Patrick. Oh, sorry, were you seeking the call, Senator Davey? I'll go to Senator Davey and then back to you. Senator Davey.
Thank you very much, and I rise to speak on this motion. I believe I want to again draw the attention of the Senate to the response by Senator Zed Zaselja. A commitment has been made to provide a formative response, a more detailed response to the Senate by Friday the 29th of October, consistent with Standing Order 166. Because let me remind you, this OPD was only received yesterday. Deliberations are ongoing. You want us to preempt outcomes of deliberations by releasing modelling that underpins current discussions, current negotiations and current considerations. I mean, and this is coming from the Labor Party. Let's not forget, last election the Labor Party took a commitment for a 45% cut in emissions by 2030 without releasing any modelling, without releasing any costings and without any consideration of what impact that would have on jobs. Jobs, regional communities, farmers, miners and the local bakers and newsagents that depend on those jobs for their businesses. I hear Senator McAllister saying we're doing a deal in secret. Well, we are having very serious discussions because we have been talking to our constituents. We are taking back our constituents' considerations. We don't do deals like the Labor Party in caucus and then foist it upon the Australian public and expect them to fall in line behind us. And unlike Senator Watt, we actually know who our constituents are. AgForce, which is a Queensland organisation that Senator Watt doesn't even realise is a member of the NFF.
Order.
The AgForce, who used to run a fantastic campaign, Farmers, every family needs one. So, you know, AgForce are a wonderful organisation and you should know who they are, Senator Watt. You should understand what they have asked for.
Senator Davey, I remind you to your remarks to the chair, not directly to any senator in the chamber. Thank you.
I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Deputy President. But I'm back to the important issue at hand. I mean, earlier on, Senator Wong said this government was full of inaction. Inaction. You're talking about a government that has seen massive reductions of emissions since coming into this place and taking on government in 2013, through technology, not taxes, through working in partnership with industry. So instead of hitting industry over the head with a big stick like an ETS or like a carbon tax, we've sat down with industry and we've said, how can we all work together? How can we lower emissions? How can we incentivise innovation? Partnering with the private sector to bring a portfolio of low emissions technology in parity with their current alternatives. Working on what is available today, but also with an eye on the future, because when we're talking about a 2050 target, that is 30 years away. Imagine if we sat down 30 years ago and said, this mobile phone that I have in my handbag today, because it wouldn't fit in my pocket, is going to be the mobile phone we're using in 30 years' time. It is ridiculous to try and cement us into a position. What we are doing is laying the foundations for a roadmap, but we're not doing it blindly and we're not doing it deftly. And that is why the Nationals are negotiating. That is why the Nationals are looking at protections to underpin the very jobs and industries that have kept our economy strong through COVID. If it wasn't for our agricultural sector, if it wasn't for our mining sector, if it wasn't for our exports of iron ore and coal and our exports of beef and wheat and rice, in the last year we've had a good rice harvest as well. If it wasn't for those exports, we wouldn't have made it through COVID with the economic strength that we have. We wouldn't be the first country to return to the same number of employed Australians as pre-COVID. So the Nationals—
Thank you, Senator Davey. Your time has expired. I indicated before I'd go to Senator Patrick and then I'll go to you, Senator Roberts. Thanks. Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I rise to take note along with my other colleagues. I do concede, as Senator Davies has indicated that the letter that has come to the chamber gives some hope that there may be disclosure. I just want to remind the chamber that the position of the Senate has always been, and I've just had a quick look at it just to refresh myself, has always been that it is the deliberations of Cabinet that are accepted as being the basis of a proper public interest immunity claim. That is the conversations that take place, and the basal reason for that confidentiality is because of collective responsibility. The ability for ministers to argue across the table and that to be held secret is in some sense sacrosanct, and I accept that. It doesn't extend to cabinet documents. The Senate has never accepted that. And all too often we see people, ministers sprinkling the cabinet secrecy dust over things that it shouldn't be sprinkled over. And I note that at the start of this year, I'm sure, and perhaps in the finance minister's $40 billion discretionary fund, they bought a whole bunch more secrecy dust because they had to extend it to national cabinet. Even though we know national cabinet's not a cabinet, they're still definitely sprinkling the cabinet secrecy dust over that. So there is some hope in the letter that has been provided to the Senate, and that's a good thing. I urge the Prime Minister to release this information and to do so as early as possible, because there is a debate that's taking place, and debates are always better if they're informed debates. Let's see the modelling. Let's see where everything lies, rather than having everyone guess. Even the statements made by the Prime Minister have caused Senator Canavan, a member of his own team, coalition team, doubts, and I supported that. Hence, we collectively combined to move the motion in the first place. In New Zealand, I'll just remind senators, in New Zealand, cabinet secrecy doesn't exist. I think there's something like a 30-day time limit, and then everything's released. Unless it's national cabinet or unless it's national security, it's released, and their democracy hasn't fallen over. So, maybe it's time that our Parliament starts to consider whether or not we want to move towards adoption of the New Zealand system. It's a responsible system of government, and it seems to manage okay. In fact, I'd argue in many cases does a lot better through the openness and transparency that their cabinet regime offers the New Zealand people. There's an example that we should adopt there. So, whilst I just point out the hard reality is cabinet deliberations, yes, that's a public interest immunity. Cabinet documents, no. But in any circumstance, the Prime Minister is authorised to release cabinet documents. He did it for the Doherty modelling. He should also do it for this modelling that is the subject of this order.
Thank you, Senator Patrick. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President, and I take note as well. But I want to discuss more the concerns I have leading up to the government acceding to the Senate's request. I also make note of Senator Patrick's comment then that debates are better if informed, and that's where I want to go to. Senator Birmingham said earlier on today, the government is doing the legwork. Well, if that's the truth, why don't they show it? Why have we gone through this charade for the government to capitulate anyway? And then the government mentioned through Senator Birmingham that the government is arguing that they won't do it because Labor won't do it. That's got nothing to do with the issue at all. This issue is about integrity, and it goes back at least 20 years. It goes back 25 years. The integrity is shot to bits. And that goes to a fundamental point about this parliament. There is a lack of accountability in this parliament. And the way to change that is to change the parliament. Let me remind people, senators here, of what Senator Ian MacDonald said back in 2016, the last Monday before Christmas. He said that he wanted to congratulate me because I've started the debate on climate science that has never been had in this parliament. Never been had in this parliament. The debate on climate science has never been had. Senator Patrick talks about an informed debate. How can we have an informed debate about the second issue about cutting carbon dioxide when we don't know whether we should cut it? That's fundamental. Mr John Howard, the leader of the Liberal National Howard Anderson government from 1996 through to 2007, enacted the renewable energy target and last year expressed regret for doing so. And so he should, because it's crippling our industry. He was the first major party leader to have a policy in place for an emissions trading scheme that Tony Abbott rightly called a carbon tax. The first leader of a major party in this country with an ETS, an emissions trading scheme, a carbon tax, was John Howard. Now, John Howard enacted all these things, and along with his government stole farmers' property rights to comply with the Kyoto Protocol. That is fact. And he did so, his government did so, by going around the Constitution to avoid Section 51, Clause 31, paying just terms compensation to farmers. And he went through the state governments to do that. So the Howard Anderson Liberal National Government went through the back door deceitfully around the Constitution to steal farmers' property rights. This is about integrity. And then, to cap it off, in 2014, John Howard, speaking at a conference in London, a skeptic conference in London, said that on all this climate science, he is agnostic. He is agnostic. So he put in all these policies, stole hundreds of billions of dollars worth of farmers' property rights, yet didn't have the science. Now, I agree with Senator Waters today, shocked though everyone may be, because she said modelling is crap, and she is absolutely correct. Then she talked about kissing the Great Barrier Reef goodbye, agricultural productivity sliding, Murray-Darling Basin say goodbye, yet for 773 days she's refused to provide the empirical scientific evidence that we need to cut carbon dioxide. For 11 years she's failed to do that. I was a joint panellist with Senator Waters back in 2010 in October. And I challenged her, as a member of the panellists, I challenged a fellow panellist to debate me on the science, to debate me on the corruption of science. She jumped to her feet and said, "I will not debate you," because they have not got a position. We hear comments from the Greens about kissing the Great Barrier Reef goodbye. The core premise is that we need to cut carbon dioxide. We have not discussed that in this parliament, ever. And yet we're going to launch into a crusade for trillions of dollars, destroying this country. Trillions of dollars worth of opportunity cost. We need to get back to the basics and have a debate about integrity and accountability, and let's have the data out and let's start that debate.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Scarr.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I say to Senator Roberts, if we stand back and deny reality, if we deny reality of what is happening in our major trading partners, and I know you've worked in the coal mining industry, and I've done a lot of work in the coal mining industry, as you know, the reality is that a lot of those major trading partners that we had, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, who supported the development of our mining industries in Australia, they are moving towards a net zero emissions policy by 2050. They're moving, Madam Deputy President. To some extent, what Australia does is irrelevant. The world is moving, and it would be wrong of us. It would be wrong of us to deny that reality. It would be wrong of us to deny that reality. Companies like, and Senator Roberts will know these companies very well, companies like Marubeni, companies like Mitsui, companies like Mitsubishi, that was part of the BHP, is still part of the BHP-Mitsubishi alliance that has developed a lot of the great mines in Queensland, in our home state. Companies like POSCO, companies like J-Power, they are all moving specifically towards hydrogen. and we can't deny that reality. We will be doing a great disservice to our country to deny the reality. And that is the reality. That is the reality. We have to look outwards. We're a trading nation. We have to look outwards and see what is happening in the world. We have that responsibility to do it. We have that responsibility to do it. I remember sitting on a Senate Select Committee with Senator Ayres, and the AMWU gave evidence which I found particularly compelling in relation to industries such as the car industry and other heavy manufacturing industry. And the repeated theme around the country was when those major industries shut down, the research suggests that a third of workers maybe find full-time work somewhere else, a third of workers go on a repetitious cycle of casual work and part-time work. They never get back into full-time work, and a third of workers maybe never get employed again. We can't let that happen in Australia. We can't let that happen in Australia. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to embrace the new technologies and create jobs for Australians. We have to accept the reality of the situation. And those who doubt the future of a hydrogen industry in this country, I say to you, look at the economic miracle in Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan following World War II. Look at that economic material. Those great nations are focused. They are focused in terms of those new technologies. They're focused on it. We can't lose the opportunity to work with them. If we do, we will be letting down our communities. The government has been abundantly clear. It is a cornerstone of our policy that there will be no carbon tax. There will be no carbon tax. But what there will be is an embracing of new technologies, and in particular hydrogen. And if you look at the material which is being put out by the Japanese government in particular in terms of the future use of hydrogen in Japan, and as you know, Senator Roberts, given your background in the coal mining industry, you know they are one of our most successful trading partners in terms of coal mining. If you look at the material being put out by the Japanese Ministry of Economics, their focus is on building a hydrogen industry, and we have to be part of that supply chain. We have to be part of that supply chain. And I say to those who doubt it, look at the track record of countries like Japan, Korea and Taiwan, and how successful we have been working with them. But we have to work with them. We can't deny their reality, which is there for all to see. We can't deny that reality. We have a moral obligation to accept the reality of the situation and work constructively forward, embracing the new technologies that will provide further jobs for Queenslanders and for our regions. The opportunity is there. We've got to embrace it, and we've got to embrace it optimistically. The technology is being developed. We've got to look forward with optimism. There are opportunities there, Madam Deputy President, but we have to have the courage to seize them and make the most of them.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. If there are no other speakers, Senator Small.
Deputy President, we've heard a lot about accountability today, and this is a government that is accountable to the people that matter most, the Australian people that sent us here to not only outline our plans before the election, but to stand by them after the election. So we won't be lectured by a Labor Party that had a leader that very famously said there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead, and promptly implemented such a tax afterwards. So in terms of addressing the issue here today—
Senator Small, resume your seat, please. Senator Wong.
I know Senator Small may not have noticed the matter we're debating, but the matter relates to a failure by your government to table economic modelling. It is not relevant for the senator to digress to a discussion about what occurred in, I think, 2010.
Thank you, Senator Wong. So we're debating the order that was returned. Are you seeking a point of order, Senator McKenzie?
Well, I would like to contribute to the fact that Senator Wong's saying that Senator Small's—
Senator McKenzie, are you on a point of order? If you're not, please resume your seat. Thank you. Please continue, Senator Small.
Thank you, because as you point out, Senator Wong, this debate is about accountability. And accountability to the Australian people matters more than any other. This is a government that protects jobs, keeps the lights on and keeps energy prices lower, quarter on quarter on quarter. So our approach, which we outlined to the Australian people before the last election, was emissions reduction through technology, not taxes, expanding consumer choice, not restricting it. We will achieve a net zero ambition for this country with incentives, not with penalties. We will partner with the private sector to bring a portfolio of low-emission technologies to parity with their current alternatives or better, and consolidating our advantage in affordable and reliable energy whilst being a credible, transparent government accountable to Australians for our progress. So our track record, which is a matter of public record—
the time for this debate has expired. Please resume your seat. Order, Senator Wong. So the question is that the motion moved by Senator Wong— Order. So the question is the motion moved by Senator Wong to take note of answers be agreed. Order. I am putting the motion. So the question is the motion is moved by Senator Wong to take note be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We'll now move to taking note. Senator Watt.